Thank you, Madam Speaker. Let me again emphasize how important this piece of legislation has been. And there's no doubt that from the full extent of the debate in this House, it really has met my own expectations that it was going to be so significant that both sides of the House would become engaged. And so I want to thank not only my colleague on this side of the House, the distinguished Senator and Minister for Environment and Sustainable Development, etc., but also my colleagues on the opposite side who have given their full support to this piece of legislation. But in the process, of course, have made some important suggestions and would have pointed out certain specific areas that we need to look at as we perfect this legislation and make it workable. Mr. Speaker, I think, as was mentioned, trust is critical, and I want to emphasize and endorse that. There has to be a trust between the consumer and the provider of the services or goods that are being transacted. It is going to be very important that we always recognize safety. I go back to trust because if there's no trust, then the safety requirements can be in some way affected. I don't believe that there is any doubt that the education that I spoke of would be shortchanged. Education of the consumer, education of the provider of the service or of the commodity, that is going to be critically important in going forward. And so each of us, even as legislators, would have to be up to date with the expectations, because we have constituents who from time to time will come to us and seek guidance on a number of matters of this kind. And so we should be familiar with the outline and the objectives of this piece of legislation in terms of protecting consumers, because a lot of us, of course, will have constituents who are consumers, all of us. And as a result of that, we must be familiar with the legislation ourselves. It's very interesting that the member for Nevis 12 did Nevis 11. 12 has not come as yet. Right. So Nevis 11, who was very correct in looking at the composition of the Consumer Protection Board, and who identified in Section 6.2 that there is an anomaly in 6.2c and also 6.2.3. Right. Because really, it says here in Section 6.2, Section 6, subsection 2, that, and referring to C, a member who is an attorney at law of at least 7 years standing, and it says, who shall be the chairperson of the board. But later on, in 3, it says, that is subsection 3, it says, the minister may appoint one of the members of the board to be the chairperson and another member to be the deputy chairperson, etc. Really, we will have to have an amendment, because it is not expected that the chairperson has to be a lawyer. And so we would have to make that amendment later. Thank my colleague on the other side for pointing out what appears to be an error that we would have to correct, because that is not the intention, really. I believe that really we've done what is expected of us as parliamentarians. We have constantly heard the cries of our people. We recognize that something needs to be done, and we have come here and we have made a serious attempt to address a lot of these concerns which would have come our way over a period of time. The Consumer Protection Bill, again, it sets out a particular framework that consolidates in one place key consumer protection rights that are exercisable in relation to the supply of goods and services. The bill also has established the duties and the obligations of suppliers. Further, the bill establishes administrative and legal frameworks for the identification of violations involving the supply of goods and services, the physical and financial security of consumers, unfair trade practices and transactions, and unfair contract terms. And wherever we are emphasizing, wherever there are violations, the bill also has given us provision for both consumers and suppliers to be heard. And that is what the point I want to make. It's the balance that this piece of legislation brings. It gives the opportunity, wherever there are violations, it brings the opportunity for consumers and suppliers to be heard, and for consumer redress, and for supplier defense wherever that is appropriate. And that is why I say it is a landmark piece of legislation, because it is fair and it is balanced. I want to say before wrapping up the debate, the second reading, that St. Kitts and Nevis really is in a new era, okay? And we are setting the stage for fairness, for balance, for justice, for all of these to be meted out and exercised and received by our people. There are new demands that are being made in this new era that we are entering. New demands such as being eco-friendly in businesses, being conscious of the emerging new technologies that are available to us and which have been mentioned specifically by my colleague from Nevis 11. We are speaking of embracing the digital economy. We will not get further as a developing nation unless we are prepared to embrace the digital economy. And unless we are going to be engaged and involved seriously into research and development. We speak of being an innovative people in a new and emerging innovative country. We have quality production systems, and the products from these systems and the branding and the high quality and the technically skilled force that we are encouraging to emerge, all this won't happen unless there are fair trade practices between the consumer and those who are supplying the service or the commodities. So we are really setting the stage for moving in the right direction. And one of the important critical areas that we continue to complain about, as I said before, as a people, was this whole thing about price gouging and so forth. I want to make it clear that the government has set the basic formula that should be applied when it comes to this particular matter. In fact, I want to share with you, I lost it. I want to share with you the publication that we have at the moment with regard to the distribution and price of goods. I mentioned earlier that how are the prices set? The prices are set based on the import cost, and that, of course, entails what you buy it for and the cost for transportation, etc. And the markup, which would have been set by the government through the Distribution and Price of Goods Act, which we practice in this country and which brings guideline to the members of the consumer protection officers in the Ministry of Consumer Affairs, etc. I want to give you an example of what I speak of. For example, based on this Distribution and Price of Goods Act, I want to just touch a number of common commodities and say to you that there is a specific percentage, and thus the price would emerge based on these percentage guidelines. Let us take, for example, frozen chicken. The maximum wholesale price, according to the law that we are using at this time, should have a 20% only, 20% only on the landed cost of the chicken, frozen chicken. The Consumer Affairs officer, when he visits the supermarket, he would have been armed with information from customs, or even if he doesn't go to the store, with the information in terms of the import cost from customs, he should be able to go and knock on the office door of that particular supermarket or business place and say, show me what are your costs at landing, what you have paid, etc. And then he would make his calculation. 20% only markup he should have. So if it is more than that, then we know that's price gouging. And that is going to be attacked by the consumer. That is wrong. And that is how it is done. And that is how we intend to ensure that it continues to be done. In the past, when that was done, the guy could say, well, it costs so and so. He may say, show me. And he may say, well, I can't find the documents now. Go away or something. Can't do that anymore. The law says he must show the documents, what it cost when the goods were brought into the country from overseas, looking at, as I said, his buying price from the company, the freight, the insurance, and 20% only is the maximum that should be charged. Of course, he can go below, because if the guy down the street is selling at 20 that he would have applied, he may say, boy, I could live with 15% markup, so I drop my price down. It should never be above. And I make mention that all these goods, they're here. Chicken frozen, meat, and they're not only given the price. They're not only given the price in Bastille, because I think the senator, minister, made mention of the price changes accordingly based on where you are, rural parts or town. But the list outlines the maximum retail price in special districts and the maximum retail price in Bastille. So the wholesale price for the chicken I just mentioned was 20% on landed cost. But in the Bastille area, the maximum retail price could go to 25%. But in the country or special areas, it's still 25%. You have to be smart now in shopping, or smarter in shopping. You have to ask questions. And the Consumer Affairs Department, it must do its work. It must continue to publish on a regular basis the movement of prices based on the landing cost and the maximum markup that is allowed. This is to protect our consumers. That is the new era that we are entering in. That is how we are going to create a sustainable island state. That is how we are going to make sure that the necessary sustainable development goals are achieved. All of us have to work with each other for this to be achieved. With those few words, Madam Speaker, and with the support of my colleagues, I want to thank you all for this opportunity to ensure that St. Kitts and Nevis moves into the new era and we protect our consumers in the process, and we encourage our businessmen, bring in the best of what there is for us to consume. Nice up your stores. Make sure that they are hygienically fit. No cockroaches and rats running the place. Nice it up, smooth up the place. Change the tiles, put on your paint. This is a new St. Kitts and Nevis that we are creating. May it please you, Madam Speaker.